Hi, I'm reading tonight another Beatrix Potter story. This one is The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. The Tale of Benjamin Bunny. Oh, look at that. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the trot-trot of a pony. Aren't the sound effects so adorable? A gig was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor. Do we remember Mr. McGregor from yesterday? He was the gardener with the hoe that was chasing after Peter Rabbit. A gig was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. Look at the little bunny, and look at his shoes. He has tiny little shoes. As soon as they had passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and stepped off with a hop, skip, and a jump to call upon his relations, who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. There they are. Do you see them? The wagon and the horses with Mr. and Mrs. McGregor. They're in the background. That wood was full of rabbit holes, and in the neatest, sandiest hole of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. I have lavender growing in my house. It's one of my favorite smells. And I have rosemary growing also, but I never make it into tea. Little Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. I wonder why he was there. He came around the back of the fir tree. Remember what that is? The fir tree? It's like a Christmas tree, an evergreen tree. And he nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin, Peter. Can you see Peter there? He's there. Peter was sitting by himself. Oh, look at him. Look at him. He looked poorly. He was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. Peter, said little Benjamin in a whisper, who has got your clothes? Oh, do you see Benjamin's shoes there at the top? I wonder if this is right after Peter lost his jacket at the garden. Let's find out. Peter replied, the scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden. Exactly. And he described how he had been chased about the garden and had dropped his shoes and his coat. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in a gig, like a wagon, and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day, because she was wearing her best bonnet. That's true. She was wearing her best bonnet. Peter said he hoped that it would rain. At that point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole calling, Cottontail, Cottontail, fetch some more chamomile. Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. I wonder what that's all about. Why would he feel better if he took a walk? They went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here, they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the scarecrow, topped with an old tam-o'-shanter of Mr. McGregor's. I have never heard the word tam-o'-shanter, but it looks like a hat. Little Benjamin said, "It spoils people's clothes to squeeze under a gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree." Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence, as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. That's pretty cute. Did you ever think that rabbits would be climbers of trees? I never did. It had been sown with lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Is that the funniest thing? Clogs are sort of like Crocs, but they don't have anything on the back of them to hold them on, usually. They're just slip-on shoes. Clogs. I haven't said that word in a long time. Clogs. Remember yesterday we read a word? What's that word that I loved listening to? Lippity. Lippity, lippity. I love that word. Little Benjamin said that the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes in order that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. They took them off the scarecrow. There had been rain during the night. There was water in the shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam-o'-shanter, but it was too big for him. Now, if you remember the cover, there it is. Looks like he's wearing the same outfit. Then he suggested they should fill the pocket handkerchiefs with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. And I would suspect that Peter was a little nervous being in the garden again. Wouldn't you? He got into so much trouble the day before. He shouldn't have even been there. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home, and he ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming in the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces certainly were very fine. I recently heard that the best time to pick lettuce is in the morning. It allows for the lettuces to be sweeter. So when I was growing lettuces this spring, still am, I picked it in the morning, and then I washed them off and dried them really well and put them in the refrigerator, and they kept for days. Peter did not eat anything. He said he should like to get home. Presently, he dropped half the onions. Oh, boy. I think he is a little bit of a nervous Nelly right now. Don't you? I think he is a little anxious. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables. I think maybe they should have thought about that before. He led the way boldly toward the other end of the garden. They went along a little walk on the planks, under a sunny red brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps cracking cherry stones, and they winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. The mice don't have clothes on. I wonder why. Because the hedgehog had clothes on. Presently, well, remember when we were reading about the hedgehog? She said that she was doing I forget what she called it. She was washing something that was right here. So they just don't look like they have clothes on, but there's part of that is clothes. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. Oh no. And look what happened. More of their vegetables fell out. They're all over the place now. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. What do you think made him stop? I don't know. Although I have a thought. That's what I was thinking. But I thought it was maybe the white cat. I think they're in trouble. This is what those little rabbits saw around the corner. Little Benjamin took one look, and then in half a minute, less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. They are in trouble. They are in trouble. I would suspect that a cat could catch a rabbit. The cat got up and stretched herself and came and sniffed at the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of the onions. Anyway, she sat down upon the top of the basket. That is trouble. Oh my goodness. That's trouble. Oh my goodness. She sat there for 5 hours. She sat there for 5 hours. I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket because it was quite dark, and because the smell of onions was fearful. It made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got round behind the wood, and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat upon the basket. Oh my goodness. Cats can sit a pretty long time, but 5 hours... that is a really long time. At length, there was a pitter-patter, and some bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny prancing along the top of the wall of the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco, which, as you remember, is lavender, and had a little switch in his hand. He was looking for his son. That's old Mr. Benjamin Bunny, and he is looking for Benjamin Bunny. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinion whatever of cats. He took a tremendous jump off the top of the wall onto the top of the cat and cuffed it off the basket and kicked it into the greenhouse, scratching off a handful of fur. The cat was too much surprised to even scratch back. Oh my goodness, he showed him. Wow. All I know is when you surprise a cat, they usually go tearing off. When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took his son Benjamin out by the ears and spanked him with the little switch. Then he took out his nephew Peter. Oh no. Then he took the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. When Mr. McGregor returned half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs. We knew who that is. Only the footmarks were ridiculously little. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself inside the greenhouse, locking the door upon the outside. That would be a trick. Quite a trick. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him because she was so glad to see that he had found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling with the bunches of herbs and rabbit tobacco. The end. Well, that ended nicely. Well, it's Friday night. I'm not sure if you get to stay up late tonight or if it's regular bedtime. But it's regular bedtime for me, and it's time for our bedtime prayers. So let's fold our hands and close our eyes. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Guide me gently through the night and wake me with the morning light. Amen. That's the story of Benjamin Bunny, and I suspect that John will be back on Monday, maybe with more of Mr. Tweety. Have a great weekend.